Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of Disabled and Proud. This week's guest is Aaron Fowler and he plays VI Rugby. Now you might be asking, what does VI Rugby stand for? And it stands for Visually Impaired Rugby. And we have a massive deep dive into the sport that is VI Rugby. We have a chat all about how he got into it as a sport, about his own sight loss journey, about what it's like growing up, knowing that your sight is going to degenerate, and also what it's like to be a physio, because he's also a physio. And did you know that there's a Royal Institute of Blind Physios? Isn't that absolutely incredible? These are all the things that we discuss in this episode, and also so much more. It was so lovely to chat to Aaron, and we had a real good natter about all things disabled, all things sport, and all the things that I love. So, carry on listening for an incredible episode. Aaron, welcome to Disabled and Proud. How are you doing?
Hi, Brooke. Yeah, no, very well, thank you. Thank you very much for having me on the podcast.
Do you know what? I know I've said this before we started recording, but I'm genuinely so excited about this conversation because we're going to delve in to the life of a VI rugby player. And if you don't know what that means, that stands for, is it Visually Impaired Rugby?
Yeah.
Which I think is amazing because I recently heard that rugby is like fully the most adapted and most adaptive sport that there is.
Yeah, I think it must be. I can't think of too many others. Obviously within rugby, you've got wheelchair rugby, both union and league. You've got the physical disability rugby league. You've got what's it called, mixed ability rugby. I don't know if you're familiar with that. So that's where you get able-bodied and people with various physical impairments, sensory impairments, all playing together as well, and the rules are adapted to include everyone. And then obviously, as you mentioned, visually impaired rugby as well. So yeah, I think it's and I think rugby, since our journey, with the visually impaired rugby, I think, we found the rugby community just very supportive and, very welcoming. But I think rugby's always been like that. I've been a big rugby fan ever since I was, probably 6. I think I've been going to watch rugby, and, it's always very inclusive because people are, sat mixed in with the opposition fans, and you can take a beer to your seat and have a drink with people from around the world, and there's never any trouble. It's just good natured, sort of banter, and that's how it should be.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm also like a huge rugby fan anyway. And so the fact that rugby and disability merge together so well for me is like such a highlight because I love it as a sport. I love watching it. I definitely don't play it. I would get absolutely squashed like a little bug on a windscreen. But I love being able to like take part in the watching it. And you're so right. The rugby community is so open and so welcoming. And like I said, the fact that disability and rugby go hand in hand kind of makes me happy because it's a sport I love. I obviously love talking about disability. So being able to talk to you about VI rugby is going to be like, what a great evening for me.
Absolutely. No, I think, it's rugby has always been a big part of my life. I think, my dad was a big rugby fan. So, like I say, I started watching it when I was probably about 6. I'm a big Harlequins fan. So I guess that's how I first got involved was, watching England on the TV and then eventually going to watch Harlequins play. And then, it used to be a season ticket holder at Quins for a few years. So go and watch, several games a season, and been to watch England play probably 100 times or whatever it might be now. So the chance to play, at a competitive level has been fantastic too.
Yeah, I bet it's been one of the most like incredible things that you've ever experienced. But actually, let's kind of go back. Let's dial it back a little bit and let's talk about you, because we're going to talk about VI rugby. We're going to talk about disability. This is what I do. This is why people listen to this show, which is exciting for me and also for you. But let's talk about you for a little bit. So when it comes to your disability, how would you describe it to somebody? Like, how do you refer to your disability?
So I'm visually impaired. I've got a condition called retinitis pigmentosa. It rolls off the tongue.
Imagine trying to say that 3 times when you've had a drink.
I know, right? It's call it RP for short. That's what most people in the VI community will know it as. So I was diagnosed when I was 5. So it's I was born with it. It just wasn't picked up till I was 5 years old. The main symptoms of RP are tunnel vision and night blindness. So my parents noticed when I was little that perhaps I wasn't very confident in the dark, or maybe I'd sort of walk into things when other people wouldn't, maybe. And I think the opticians kind of picked it up when I was there for a sight test, and then kind of got referred to the eye hospital, and that's when it was diagnosed. So RP is a deteriorating condition, so my sight's got worse over my lifetime. Growing up at school, never really had any sort of support, so my central vision, like my reading vision, is good, but obviously it's my peripheral vision that's gone. So, as long as I was sat close enough to the board and things, I could read it, and, played sport all throughout school. And so it wasn't until I was about 16 that, it started to, when I was about 14, it started to deteriorate. So then, I guess when I did my GCSEs, that's the first time I had like extra time in exams, and that's the first time I really, I guess, had support in like the education system. Then when I was 17, I learned to use a white cane. So because obviously one of the main symptoms is night blindness, what that means is essentially it's just a lot harder for me to see in the dark than it is for a fully sighted person. So I very reluctantly learned to use a white cane. At 17 your mates are learning to drive, and you're walking around with this big white stick. So I can't say I particularly enjoyed using it, but looking back, I definitely needed it, especially at night time. And then sight got a bit worse until I was about 21. And then I then actually got a guide dog, whose name was Banwell. So I had Banwell for 5 years until he retired. And he was amazing. You get this, sort of amazing companion that you get to take everywhere with you. And honestly, like the best wingman you could ever ask for as well. Honestly, like women love dogs. It's not a lie. And then my sight, the last few years it's been stable, but in terms of how it is now, I've probably got about sort of 5 to 10% vision of a fully sighted person. Like I say, my central vision is still fairly decent, but my peripheral vision is non-existent. It's like the best way to describe it is if you put 2 straws in front of your eyes, that's sort of how narrow I guess my sort of visual field is. That's probably the best way to describe it.
Wow. There is so much to unpack in what you just said, and I love that, because I also love that you've given like a visual description of your sight, because I think when we think about tunnel vision, and like you said, like your peripheral doesn't exist, we don't really know what that means. But if we can apply it to something that we can kind of relate to, it makes up like my understanding of your visual impairment so much easier. But also that in itself is a problem, right? Because you should just be like, oh, I'm visually impaired, and that's a full sentence. But then there's me being like, but tell me more. And obviously that's why you're here. But then in and of outside of this conversation, if somebody else said that, you'd be like, we don't need to carry on with this.
I think it's interesting. I've listened to like quite a few, of your podcast episodes, and then I've met lots of like I covered the Paralympics for Whisper earlier this year. So and I'm a physio, so I meet lots of people with various disabilities, and I think. When you have a disability, you're kind of in like, you either go one or two ways. Either you get kind of really frustrated and bitter about things, or you just kind of have to kind of accept that this is how the world currently is, and this is what I'm going to do to try and hopefully have some sort of positive impact in the future. And, I think you have to have there are times, don't get me wrong, where, losing your sight can have its frustrations, but like it's also been incredible and opened up amazing opportunities and things like that. And so, for me, it's like if someone asks me about my vision impairment, like I'm always very open about it. And, to be honest, I would rather people ask me questions than kind of, be worried about asking questions. Like, so, sometimes people say some things that seem funny to me, but like, to be honest, if they haven't met someone who's visually impaired in their life, then they wouldn't know, because I think there's still a lot to be done to educate society about, people with all various disabilities. And so, I think you just have to have a sense of humour with it, don't you? And, see it as a way of educating people rather than getting frustrated that people don't know. That's my outlook anyway.
So I heard something super wild the other day whilst I was going through stats and figures of Disabled and Proud. And that is that 95% of people who listen to this podcast aren't subscribed. And so you know what would make a massive difference to the show, to me, and to the guests that we can get on is if you hit that subscribe button. Subscribe wherever you get your podcasts, whether that be Apple, whether it be Spotify, whether you watch on YouTube. Please click that subscribe button because it really helps us get in the charts. It helps us get on more incredible guests and it helps the show expand, grow and thrive. And I'd really appreciate it. Please hit that subscribe button. I really love that because it's very much swings and roundabouts. You know, like there are some good bits, there are some bad bits, and this is what we deal with. But something that you said that I would actually love to unpick, if that's okay, is that when you were 17, you learned how to use a white cane. And even before you said the sentence, you said, I was about to dive in and ask, how was that for you as a 17-year-old? And you said that it was just a bizarre experience. You had friends who were learning to drive, and then there was you learning how to use the white cane. How did that feel for you at that age? Because obviously 17 is super informative and it's also one of those really awkward, gangly years of your life. So what was it like to then be confronted with the fact that, you know, you now need to use and learn how to use a white cane? How was that?
Yeah, it was tough. So to give a bit of context, I was 12 when my parents told me like the extent to which, you know, my sight loss could develop into one day. So, you know, it may stay how it is now forever, or, you know, 5 years, 10 years, you could completely lose it, or, you know, there's just no knowing. And so I only really told a couple of my mates until I was about 15. And then that's when I started to be a bit more open about it. But I still didn't really tell that many people. And obviously until I used the cane, it like you wouldn't know that I was visually impaired because like it wasn't visible. But I think the thing I struggled about with, and I think a lot of people who are visually impaired struggle with when they first learn to use a cane, is it then becomes visible to everyone that like there's something wrong, I guess. So I guess that was kind of my mindset. And like if I used it at night to say walk to the pub, as soon as I went to the pub, I'd like hide it away. It's almost like I was embarrassed of it, which you know, looking back now is daft because like now, you know, it's when I leave the door, it's the first thing I grab, and you know, would never go out without it. And I guess the other thing is obviously, you know, when you're a teenager, obviously, you know, you're a bit more like, you know, insecure.
Self-conscious.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I think, you know, like a white cane isn't sexy. Like, you know, it's like, you know, no one looks at a white cane and goes, God, yeah, that's, you know. So I think there's that thing as well. And I think, you know, that's the difference there I was saying, like with a guide dog, it's like with a guide dog, it's, you know, people will just naturally come up and talk to you and it makes you feel a lot more comfortable. Whereas like with a cane, the way you use it is you kind of either tap it from side to side or like you sweep it. So it's almost like, you know, if you were walking towards people, you look like you're about to attack them. So I think it doesn't draw people in, it kind of sends people away in some sense. But equally saying that, you know, if people see you out and about with a cane, you know, even though I navigate the tube pretty well, things like that, you know, people will always come up and ask if you need help. And you know, that's nice. You know, I never mind people asking, even if I don't, it's, you know, it's nice that people ask, isn't it? So, so that time was definitely challenging mentally. But I had a really good, mobility instructor called Jim who worked for like the local authority, and his job was helping, you know, sort of people under the age of 18 with like their mobility skills and learning to use a cane. And he, you know, he was great with me. I think he realised that I was a young lad and, you know, wasn't really keen on it, but, you know, helped me kind of see sense. So he was, you know, he was really helpful. And, you know, my family being supportive as well, and equally not pushing me into it, but just saying, look, you know, I think this might be advisable. And meeting other visually impaired people, you know, when I was 15, started to meet some other VI people, and that helped as well, meeting people in a similar situation, I guess.
Yeah, I can imagine, because I know how invaluable it's been for me to like delve into the disabled community, and like even if I don't have the same disability as someone, there are always like commonalities, and we've always had like shared experiences, and there's something really beautiful in being able to share that experience and someone understand exactly what you're talking about. And you don't really get that outside of like the disabled community if you're like not disabled. Like you could never really understand what it's like to be a disabled person if you are not disabled. And actually, you said something really interesting. You said, I didn't really tell my friends, and it wasn't until I was about 15. And was that because of like teenage years, self-conscious, just trying to like navigate your way through the world? Or was it like I'm not necessarily sure how accepting of my disability I am. I'm just intrigued because at that age we're so awkward. Like I don't know any teenager that isn't awkward.
Yeah, I think it's probably a combination of things. I think one is probably just like when my parents, like I said, when I was 12, my parents told me the extent it could get. Yeah, there were so many questions in my head that I don't know why I
Yeah.
didn't speak to anyone, because like I have the most supporting family, and like I got some great friends, but like you just so many questions go around in your head, and but like I couldn't talk about it without kind of like breaking down and crying. So I think I just kind of put it to the back of my mind and just kind of like tried to get
Yeah.
on with things, which in hindsight wasn't the healthiest way of dealing with it, but at that age you don't really know. And like
Hindsight is a wonderful thing. Like, that's why it's hindsight.
absolutely. And so I guess also though, another reason I probably never mentioned it was like there was a lad in my class at school who had like cerebral palsy, and sometimes you could perhaps see that how sometimes perhaps he wasn't treated in the nicest possible way, and so I guess I thought, well, I didn't want to kind of be different from anyone, because you see how someone who is maybe has some differences
Different
is
is
treated,
treated.
which is kind of daft, because looking back, like I got on really well with everyone at school, and I think I had everyone's I generally got on very well with everyone. I think I've always been a nice person, make the effort to include people, and when I was older and I did start to tell people, actually, like no one cared. It's just like that they people like you for who you are. So but like you say, everything's good in hindsight, isn't it? But I think it was just like you say, as a teenager, people, all teenagers are a bit self-conscious, and I think you get more confident as you're older. I kind of say to people now, like I felt the most. I'm 33 now, and I've been the most confident I am in my 30s, I think, and I would just wish that you could know what you know now when you're younger, sort of thing.
Yeah, I hear that your 30s are the best decade, so fingers crossed that everything goes well for me. Sorry, that was a massive cough, and that's gonna have to be edited out because that's gross. Oh, I would love to chat to you about education, and not necessarily like school, but like further education and the vocation that you went down, because you said that you're a physio, and I would love to know how your vision impairment and physio go hand in hand, and what is that experience like working with other people, because obviously a physio is quite a hands-on job, and how does that work for you?
Yeah, so I've had a bit of a varied career. So I studied physiotherapy at university. I went to uni straight from college when I was 18. I guess the reason I kind of went into physio was I don't know if I ever thought, oh yeah, physio is like my dream job. But
Yeah.
I always loved sport growing up. I think people around me, sort of family, teachers, things like that, and rightly so. Were kind of like, well, you should maybe think about doing a job that you could do should like the worst happen to your eyesight. Now it kind of obviously turns out that actually you can do pretty much any job, but back then, like, I didn't really know too many VI people, and careers advice was pretty naff, things like that. So I think my family were like, well, you love sport and physio, you still get to be involved with sport as well. So obviously there was that, and I'd like doing a job where I get to help people. So so I went into that, and actually you were saying obviously about how does it work with being visually impaired and being a physio, but there's actually a very long history of visually impaired physio. So there's an organisation called the Association of Visually Impaired Chartered Physiotherapists that's been around for, I don't know, it's probably like 100 years or something like that. And because obviously physiotherapy used to be based on touch and a lot of manual therapy. So if you had no sight, obviously it's, if you've got good, you think, someone with no sight who may read Braille is obviously has a very good sense of touch. So, to be able to palpate, there are certain, when you're a physio, you learn to palpate certain parts of the body, and you can identify where you are. So I think that's why there's been quite a long history of it. So that's kind of why I went into physiotherapy, to be honest. My experience at university was pretty good. There was like a disability kind of what's the right word? Like a disability. So a person at the university who oversees like students with disabilities, make sure they get the right support and things like that. Her husband was actually visually impaired, and they kind of knew someone I played blind cricket with, and so it was quite nice meeting her when I first went to uni, and generally the support from the uni was good. What I did struggle with, I would say, was the support when I was on placement. So with physiotherapy, you do placements for about 5 weeks at different hospitals, working in different specialities. Now most of my placements were great and pretty good, but there was There's only one really I would say that I can think of where like the support just wasn't there from my educator. I just don't. I think some people are good leaders and good supervisors, and some people aren't, and I just think didn't really have a great
Yeah.
understanding. So. Yeah, but other than that, generally, uni was a good experience. In terms of my kind of career from there, I decided not to carry on with physiotherapy after finishing uni. I think it's a very intense course, and I would recommend people now to maybe work as like a physio assistant for a year before going to uni because you'll get such valuable experience. So I then worked for a year at a company where my dad worked, at a logistics company. I then decided to do a sports journalism course. I don't know if you're familiar with a place called News Associates. So News Associates is probably the best like journalism training centre in the country. They were based in Wimbledon at the time. So generally to work in a lot of big media organisations, they may look for someone, to have like an NCTJ qualification. So I did the sports journalism diploma there. We were the first ever course where everyone on our course, like everyone on an NCTJ course anywhere in the country got 100%. The challenge with that is doing shorthand. So you had to pass shorthand at 100 words a minute. So obviously, I think like less than like 40% of people pass it. Whereas, and obviously when you can only see about 10% of what a fully sighted person sees, it definitely has its challenges. But worked incredibly hard on that course and got through that. And that I probably enjoyed more than university. Like it was just such a great group of people to be studying with, just so much fun. Really intense, like worked, so hard, but so much fun as well. And I then worked as a sports journalist for a few years. Was fortunate enough to kind of freelance like Sky Sports News and TalkSport. And then basically just had a bit of a mental crisis in terms of going through really bad anxiety and depression from about sort of 2016 to end of 2018, and that's when I went back into physio because freelancing as a journalist doesn't give you a lot of stability. So I've been back in physio now for about coming up 5.5 years. I've been in the NHS in that time. And generally the support I've had has been good. Currently in my current trust, my managers have always been really good and kind of let me get on with my job, and they know that I'll come to them if I have any problems from a visual point of view. And I think the key there is like the older you get and the more experienced you are, you're able to identify what support you need and what equipment you need to help you do your job. And obviously there are things like access to work and things like that. So I think when you're younger and you're starting out in a career, it's quite hard to know what support you might need, unless you can meet someone with a similar disability who's kind of doing that role. That's a bit of a brief overview of my job. In terms, I think you mentioned in terms of how does it impact, I guess, on my current role, or and I currently work on a rehab ward. So it's a lot of patients who have maybe fallen, fractured their hips, or sometimes they may have had a stroke or various different neuro conditions. We get quite a variety. And I'm just very open with my colleagues about my visual impairment. I'll say to people, when we're seeing a patient together, rather than telling me that something's over there, tell me that the Zimmer frame at the end of the bed, or something like that. And generally people remember, but occasionally my manager will be point and say oh, over there, and she's like, sorry, I've done it again, haven't I? I was like, yeah, don't worry, my parents still do it after 30 odd years, so it's, you just have to laugh about it. But my colleagues are very supportive. I've got a good team around me, so generally it's been good.
Interesting. I think it's time to delve into VI rugby. I want to talk about your sports journey, because you also said that you played blind cricket. Now, as someone who doesn't experience visual impairment and sport being like a big part of your life, how did you find sports that you could play? Because it's not like they're just round the corner from your house. How did you find blind rugby, and then how did you find VI rugby?
So in terms of how I guess first got into vision impaired sports, I was about 15, so I always played, for my school teams, football, hockey, athletics, things like that. Played kind of Sunday league football, and then when I was 15, and my sight got to the point where it was getting a lot harder to kind of because of my sight to be as competitive, as I used to be. I had a thing through the door about going and trying some blind cricket down at Hampshire, down at the Aegeus Bowl, as it's called now. And then that's how I first got involved in blind cricket. So I used to have to travel. So it was about an hour away, hour's drive from sort of where I lived.
Yeah.
So when you play disability sports, you generally have to be willing to travel quite a lot. Yeah, absolutely. And then had a good time, playing blind cricket. Played for Hampshire for about 5 years and had trials with the England team for about a year.
Oh wow!
And things like that. And then I played for a few years later after I left Hampshire. I played for Surrey for a few years and sort of captained their development side and vice captained the team there. Vice captain at Hampshire. And then visually impaired rugby. I found out about it in about 2016. I first came across it, but because of my work as a journalist, I didn't really have the time to go along. And then it wasn't until about early 2019, and I first went along to visually impaired rugby, and it was at a park in Twickenham, and there was a few of us there, and really enjoyed it. Just really enjoyed the chance to have to play rugby. And basically it was developed by a charity called the Change Foundation, who are based in Croydon. So the Change Foundation are a brilliant organisation who help people from various backgrounds through sport, whether that be refugees or women or people from kind of this maybe sort of poorer areas, or disabilities. So becoming involved with them has been brilliant. And ever since I went to the first session, like my love of the game has just grown. I was very fortunate. So when I started playing, they'd announced that they were taking the team to Japan around the time of the 2019 Rugby World Cup to play a 3-match series out there. And they'd already kind of picked the team, before I'd, sort of started playing. And then I think someone dropped out, and then they, phoned and said, would you still be interested in going? So, managed to get the time off work. And, we had a unbelievable time. I mean, to get the chance to go and play rugby out in Japan, to be out there during the World Cup, it's just phenomenal. We were in Tokyo for about 10 days. When we got there was actually a typhoon. So we landed, I can't remember what day of the week it was. Let's say we landed on the Tuesday. There was a typhoon on the Wednesday, and we were due to train. So we ended up training in like the underground car park of the hotel. And then,
goodness!
You got a bunch of visually impaired blokes running around in the car park. Fortunately, there's no cars driving about, but we were quite limited in terms of our preparations. And then we basically played a 3-match series against Japan, which we won. Japan were a good side. They were pretty pacey, quite skillful. So it'd be brilliant to play with them again. In a few weeks' time. It was just a hell of an experience. And I think coming away from that, you build bond. When you're away and you're on a team trip like that, like you build great bonds with people.
100%.
I think we've just been really keen to try and help grow the game and keep it going. So it's been fantastic to keep the ball rolling. Since that first trip.
So obviously, VO rugby does not work the same way that like rugby that we watch on the TV works. So what are the differences? So from the little bit of research that I did, because I did some research, which is not necessarily the most like me thing to do, but from what I can gather is that the ball makes a sound or like is audible, and you can have guides. But after that, my knowledge is absolutely limited, and I feel like you're definitely the expert to ask. So please tell me, how does it work?
So there's not really guides. Within visually impaired sports, you've got a sight classification system ranging from B1, which would be a player with no sight, and then that would go up to, say, a B4, who is like the highest level of visual impairment that would qualify to play our sport.
To play.
For visually impaired rugby, I'd say, you probably need a little bit of vision because the ball does have ball bearings in it, but it's not very, like when you pass it, you would need very good hearing to hear it. Like, most of us are playing with the sight that we have, basically. And it's played 7-a-side, so and it's a touch version. So basically, a two-handed touch to the body would be a tackle. When a player gets tackled, a bit like in rugby league, they have to put the ball down between their legs. And if the team doesn't score a try after 6 tackles, then the ball gets turned over to the opposition, basically, again, a bit like in rugby league. We have scrums and lineouts, but they're uncontested. It's just a way of restarting the game. So also, because obviously, when you've got people who are vision impaired, you're going to get more knock-ons than you would in, say a fully sighted game of rugby. So if a player knocks the ball on, rather than it being a turnover or a scrum, your team will just lose a tackle. And then if there's a forward pass, that's when there would be a scrum. And our pitch, it's about 2/3 the size of a full-size pitch, but we're still kind of, we were training the other day and we were kind of like, actually this seems a little bit small, so I think we're still kind of, as the game grows, some of the rules will vary a little bit. And we're also at this tournament that we're having in November, we're going to try having like a one-handed touch as a tackle, because you'll get more tackles in the game and it'll help speed it up. And again, maybe make it a bit more entertaining from a spectator's point of view as well. So that's generally other than that, it's like watching a game of sevens, just without the big hits in it, I guess.
I love that. Sorry, my eyes just got really itchy then, and I was saying that. Really awkward timing. I love that it's actually so simple. Like, now that you've said it out loud, I'm like, of course that's how it would work. Like, duh. But obviously you don't know what you don't know. And I actually quite like that as a theme for this conversation. But in terms of like playing and leagues, and you just mentioned like a big competition in November, how does it work playing against other teams? Because obviously, when we think of like able-bodied sports, there are teams all over the gaff. Like, we don't have to really think about who people are playing, because, finding another team to play is not necessarily that hard. But when it comes to this, do you get to play like inter-county? Is it inter-country? Like, how does it work?
So currently, in terms of domestically, there's kind of 3 teams, I guess you could say, like in this country. So we've had a Harlequins team based in London. There's been a Worcester team, which was kind of run by like the Worcester Warriors Foundation, and then Cardiff Blues, or Cardiff Rugby now have a team that's been going for a few years as well. But me and 2 of my teammates, basically this year, our captain Jack and one of our teammates Jay, have got started working with the Change Foundation to really try and help grow the game both domestically and internationally. Internationally, the game's now played in about 8 countries. So we've got England, Ireland, France, Japan, New Zealand, Wales, I think Argentina, and I feel like I'm missing one, Italy possibly. And the goal is to kind of, so as you mentioned, obviously we went out to Japan, and then last year we had an international tournament out in Toulon. So there was England, France and Ireland. And again, we were out there during the Rugby World Cup, and we won, as an England team, we won that. So, as an England team, we're still unbeaten, which has been really good. But, the teams we're playing against are brilliant. In Ireland, their club team is sort of Old Wesley. So there's been a couple of trips over to Dublin to play rugby there the last 2 years as well. So, opportunities are growing all the time. But, as you kind of alluded to, you have to be prepared to travel. So in terms of in England now, the main sessions are at Sutton and Epsom Rugby Club in London. And then this year we've also started a northern base up at Stockport Rugby Club. So a few of us will travel, to both of those. We've got players all over the country. One guy comes over from Northern Ireland for training, so he'll fly over, stay a night just for a 2-hour rugby session, and then another few hours in the bar after. But and like when I go up to Stockport, it's a 4-hour one trip one way, just for like a 2-hour rugby session. But because you love it, because you're passionate about it, and you get to play rugby with your mates, you do it. But our goal is to keep growing the game, so that hopefully eventually we've got more teams around the country and more competitions, get a domestic league going, and keep growing the game internationally as well.
Something that you said about travel, and I think it's a well-known thing between disabled people, that if you are interested in sports and you play disabled sports, you have to travel. And is that ever subsidized? Like, is this, you guys are paying very much for all of your own travel? There is no help from nobody. How does it work?
So at the moment, so for example, when we travel to training and things like that, that comes out of our own pocket, so that's why you've really got to love it. I mean, a trip up to Stockport will cost me probably 70 quid return, sort of thing. But in terms of when we've been to France, for example, last year for the tournament, we actually fundraised as a team. So we fundraised, I guess, best part of 10 grand to be able to go out there. I know Japan, who are coming over here to play in the tournament, they've been fundraising as well. And the rugby community have been great. So I think the Wasps Rugby Club, who I'm sure you're probably familiar with, they've got they've got a Legends Foundation, and they donated quite a lot of money a few years ago, I believe, to visually impaired rugby. So Sutton and Epsom Rugby Club have been really supportive. The Change Foundation, obviously, we're always doing during the lockdowns. As players, we did quite a few like virtual challenges, where we've fundraised. So we've raised a few grand for doing that as well. The goal, I guess, really over the next few years is sort of starting to try and build some links with the RFU, because what always baffles me is, and I've covered disability sports a lot as a journalist as well, and so one of the biggest problems is finances, and also getting word out about the sports, because there are so many people out there that are visually impaired that probably still don't know that visually impaired rugby exists, because we're still trying to grow it and spread word, and so that if the RFU were to get involved, now, for example, they have the outreach through their social media to help spread word of the game and things like that. So sometimes it just baffles me why some like national sporting bodies are a bit slower to kind of get involved with sports, because they've got the they may from the outside it may seem they have the finances, maybe they don't, but they're going to have people who have some expertise that could help with at least giving ideas of how we could grow the game, and equally they'll have social media teams that will have a big following that could put things on there, because and that's why I was so passionate as a journalist was about promoting disability sports, because so many people still don't know that those things, are out there. So I think over the next few years, like I say, we hope to build better links with organisations like that, to really help, hopefully grow the game, and hopefully one day, be in a position where we can provide, some contribution towards, sort of people's travel for training and things like that.
Yeah. You alluded to there being some form of tournament in November. And so who is involved in it? Like, who's involved? Where is it? How does it happen? I want to know everything.
So we've got an international tournament on the 23rd of November, which is a Saturday, which will be at Sutton and Epsom Rugby Club, where we train, which is kind of South London. So the tournament will start at 11, and it'll probably go on till about 4 o'clock, and then well into the night in the bar. And basically there'll be England, Japan, and Ireland. We were hoping that Wales were going to sort of put in a team as well, but I think, unfortunately, due to I think player numbers and things, it's not quite been possible. But so this will be the first time we've had an international tournament in England, so it'll be the first time that we've had the chance to play on home soil and play in front of family and friends. It will be like a round robin, kind of group stage. We play each team twice in the group stage, and then top two go through to the final. So we'll probably end up playing, say 4 games, on that day. Each team will play about 4 games or so. It's just a great opportunity for us to, for us to showcase our sport. Hopefully get lots of people to come down and watch. The bar will be open all day, so people can get their beers and come enjoy a great day of rugby. We're really looking forward to it. It's only the second time that we'll have played Japan, so it's fantastic that they've been able to fundraise and come across, and they've really grown the game in their own country, so it's fantastic to see. We've played the Ireland guys a few times now, and it'll be brilliant to have them come across. And what's great with the Ireland team as well is our game is mixed for men and women. Unfortunately, there aren't any women playing yet in the UK. It's just trying to get people. You've got to find people that are interested. Firstly, but we hope to grow that. But the Ireland team have probably, I think they've had, say, 5 women playing, possibly a few more, which is brilliant. With obviously the Women's Rugby World Cup taking place, in this country next year, we're hoping to try and do something where we can, try and get some more women involved in the sport as well. If anyone's free on the 23rd of November, then definitely come down and watch. It'll be a great day of rugby. England play on the Sunday, so there's no excuses for wanting to watch that over the England vision impaired rugby team. And for me, I think this will be one of the sporting highlights of the year. So definitely make sure you come down.
For sure. A really obvious question that I have not asked you, and as soon as you were talking, I was like, why did I not ask this? But how long is a game?
No, God, good question, and that's silly me for not mentioning. So a game is 2 halves of 10 minutes, and obviously, but it's very fast paced. If you've ever watched a game of sevens,
Yeah.
you'll know it's quick and yeah. So in 20 minutes you do a lot of running, and my position is scrum half. So essentially, I'm following wherever the ball goes and picking it up. So there's a lot of running involved with that. I guess another reason, to encourage people to come on down is, just to talk about a couple of our players. Our team is quite a mix in terms of people's experience playing rugby. There's people like me who maybe played a little bit when they were younger, but have always been rugby fans. So the chance then to play has been brilliant. And people who have been fairly decent in other sports, I guess. But then we've got people like one of our players, Ian, has played rugby to a fairly decent standard. Despite being visually impaired, most of his life he's played rugby to a good level. Ethan, another of our players, he was in Bristol's academy till he was about 14 or 15 until he started to lose his sight. So again, he's a very skillful player. Jack, our captain, probably the best player in the world in our sport at the moment. His skill is pretty incredible. He plays with fully sighted like touch rugby teams as well. So Jack does a lot of the coaching as well. So a lot of the plays that we learn are things from his experience as well. So there's a few players there with really good experience. Jay, another player, has played a lot of sighted rugby until he kind of started to lose his sight. So there's a lot of good experience there and a lot of good players. And then we've got a lot of quick wingers. So yeah, I think generally when people come watch it, they're impressed by the skill levels. And one thing that was brilliant actually was I don't know if you're familiar with a guy called Ian McKinley. So Ian McKinley is basically a former professional rugby player. He was Irish, and then when he was around 20, he lost sight in one of his eyes through an accident on the rugby field, and so he retired from the sport. Went out to Italy to start coaching out there, and then he basically got the chance to start playing again. And he ended up playing for Benetton, who are a professional Italian side that play in the United Rugby Championship with the Irish and South African sides. And then he went on to play internationally for Italy at fly half. And he's been a fantastic ambassador for our game. He's sort of helped develop the game in Ireland. And so when we played Ireland in France last year, he sort of played for them as well. So it's fantastic to share the, sort of get to play against someone like that, someone you can really learn from. And, even though he's playing for Ireland, like he's, really helpful with us and giving us pointers, and been a really great ambassador. So it'd be wrong if not to give him a mention as well. Like I say, he's been fantastic. So like I say, I think, and the teams we play have great players as well. I think it's definitely surprises a lot of people.
Something that you said again was that I love listening to people talk about what they're passionate about, because there's always like little nuggets that people drop. And something that you said that really like struck a chord with me is that you said that you learn plays from somebody who plays like at a different level for not even VI rugby. And actually I was thinking about this. There might be, but is there really like a playbook for how to learn how to play this? Because obviously it is quite a new sport.
Yeah, no, it's so really I guess the way we play now is sort of based on touch rugby. So touch rugby, they're like, there's an England touch rugby team, as in like a fully sighted team that plays touch rugby, and there are World Cups for touch rugby and things like that. And so our game is more like that, I would say. As I mentioned, our captain Jack plays for a sighted touch rugby team, and so a lot of the plays that we and how we've developed over the last few years in terms of how we play is kind of things that I guess he's learned through touch rugby, as well as there being some aspects that you can take from say rugby union or rugby league, but as a sport I guess we are it's more similar to touch rugby. It will be interesting to see how Japan and Ireland play. We all play slightly different ways. We generally play with a designated scrum half. Ireland, I think, sometimes do. Sometimes they might have a couple of different players kind of picking up that role. It'll be interesting to see how other teams play as well, because we don't get a chance to play against them that often. But no, it's the game's still very young. So I think how it's played in 20 years' time will probably be quite different. There'll be some similarities, very different as well. So yeah.
Oh, it's amazing that you're so involved in it when it's so young and it's like really finding its legs. And I really hope that it does find some really strong legs here, because I think the passion that you have for it is really admirable. And any passion, I think, for sports is admirable. Like, I'm a sportswoman. I love sports. My life would not be the same without it. And actually, like, if I can encourage anybody to go out and try it, then please do, because I think sports does completely change your life. And I love it when people talk about what they're passionate about. And it's very, very clear that you're very passionate about this particular sport.
I think the other thing, just to mention, if it's right, is so I did an episode of my own podcast on Mental Health Awareness Day, and talked to a couple of my teammates about sort of being visually impaired and mental health, and how we, I guess, have coped with visual impairment and things like that. And one of the things we really talked about was how supportive the sort of VI rugby community has been, and how like we've made a good group of mates over the last sort of 5-6 years that we've all been playing, because the great thing about it is we'll get together once or twice a month for a 2-hour training session, but then we'll go and have a drink together afterwards, and it's just a chance to catch up and discuss things. And a couple of people in the team, especially people like Jack and Jay, are people now that I would now consider good friends. And I think I played other sports, and sometimes you can get the odd idiot, but within rugby everyone's really friendly. Like, you can completely be yourself. It's a very supportive environment, and so I think that's definitely what stands out to other sports, I think, as well, is that social aspect and the inclusivity, like we were chatting about earlier.
I love it. I love talking about sports. I could get really carried away, and it would not necessarily be great for everybody listening, because they'd get really bored. But I would love to ask you about misconceptions of visual impairment. What do you think the biggest misconception is about visual impairment?
I think the biggest misconception is that everyone that uses a cane or a guide dog has no sight at all. Because actually, I think the stat is like 90% of guide dog owners will have some useful vision. And, I think probably the same is probably for people who use a white cane as well. For example, if you are registered, what used to be called registered blind they've now changed the name to registered severely sight impaired. So most people who are registered severely sight impaired will have like some sort of useful vision. So I think that's definitely one of the biggest misconceptions. And I could try to think of any others, really. And also I guess the whole thing of like, if you see like a blind or a vision impaired person played on, sort of TV, it's like, they wear like ridiculously big sunglasses or something like that. It's like, well, actually, we wear sunglasses for, some people have, conditions where their eyes are more sensitive to light, but, generally a lot, most of the people I know who are VI, we just wear sunglasses for the same reason other people do when the sun's out, so it's, that's quite funny as well. And I think for me, what I find hard is that I just feel there's a lot of, charities out there, and organisations that could probably do more to sort of promote what visually impaired people are capable of. But I think the reason that and it's probably the same in a lot of disabilities, I think, probably the reason a lot of charities don't promote a bit more is like, if you promote like the visually impaired person who's going skydiving rather than like the whole, poor, look at me, blind person, can't get out, need a guide dog, it doesn't pull on the heartstrings as much to raise as much money, does it? But I just think somewhere there's got to be a balance. And I think the other thing I struggle with is that I think there's a lot of organisations that don't, for example, a lot of organisations that do fantastic work that for say blind and vision impaired people, but a lot of the time those organisations don't have anyone who's vision impaired, near the top or having a say, at the top level.
Yes.
And what really frustrates me is when you have people who are very well intentioned and equally may have, be good business people. So they're good people to run a charity, but you still don't know what it's like to be visually impaired. And so you've got to have those daily conversations and that input, with people who are visually impaired or whatever disability it might be. If you're running an organisation for people, then you've got to allow your service users to have a real say and listen to the people that you're catering for, I think.
I think what you said is really representative of a lot of disabilities. It's not necessarily just visual impairment, particularly surrounding charities that could maybe have more disabled people at the top. I think there's a lot to be said in that, and that's like all I'll say on that topic. But I think there is a lot to be said, and actually the representation at the top needs to be representative of what is trying to help. And I don't think you're the only person that feels that way either. So I think it's quite it's like a general feeling for all the disabled people. But I love that you have said that, because again, it's true, because we've never had this conversation before, and yet you're saying it and I'm saying it, but we're saying it through different mediums, and I love that.
I think, one thing that's great now though is like, as I mentioned, I freelance as a sports journalist still, so I covered the Paralympics with Whisper, who produced the games for Channel 4 this year, and I do some freelance writing for the RNA, and it's been great. This is the first year where actually I've had the chance to earn money reporting on like disability sports, which has been really great. Very best to have that opportunity. But I think now with technology being how it is, you look at obviously with your podcast, there's lots of other people out there who have disabilities that are doing podcasts. So technology now is an amazing way for us to kind of like get word out there about the things we're passionate about. And but I would still like to, and I think the mainstream media is gradually shifting. Like Whisper did an amazing job in terms of their coverage of the Paralympics, and we had lots of people with various disabilities. But equally, I think it's important that you still have people without disabilities there, because they have a skill set as well, and you don't want it to be that just disabled people cover disability sports. Like I want everyone to cover disability sports, and same with like say with men's football. Now you're getting women pundits, which is brilliant, and I hope we can see some people with disabilities getting a bit more of a role in that one day potentially as well. Things again, I think things are slowly moving in the right direction. Whilst there again, it's easy to look at the frustrations. I think it's important to try and acknowledge the positives. When you're having a down day, look at the positives. I think I saw your. We were chatting earlier about obviously with your podcast, you're doing a bi-weekly, and I think I saw your LinkedIn post about initially being disappointed about only having like 1,000 subscribers on YouTube. It's like that's a hell of a feat, I think you're being harsh on yourself there. I think that's brilliant, and the fact that each episode you do is reaching out to people, and you never know how that episode might help someone, so that's something to be really proud of. So yeah.
Do you know what? I really appreciate that. I do, because I think we do this because we love it. And if we didn't love it, we wouldn't do it. And there's so much to be said in following something because you love it. And I think it takes a lot of courage and a lot of passion to be able to do it, and to do it consistently. So I really appreciate that, because everybody knows, even if they know me, even if they don't know me, that Disabled and Proud is like my firstborn child. And here we are. And I'm just making sure it has its legs. And I love having these conversations, because I wouldn't get to talk to interesting people like you because of it. But what I would love to ask you is, what are some of the weird questions that people have asked you about your disability?
So one that probably strikes me first of all is about my cane. So I have been asked, is my cane a whip? I've been asked, is my cane nunchucks? I've been asked, is it some sort of BDSM device? So that's I don't know where people get this stuff from, but I'm like, no, I'm impaired and it's a cane. I'm not Christian Grey, so that is definitely some of the weirdest things.
That is amazing.
In terms of other things, I guess like one of the frustrating things that can be a bit like frustrating is like someone you don't know will like ask you about, you get chatting and they'll ask you about your vision impairment and stuff, which, like I said, I never mind. And then they're like, oh yeah, I know how you feel because I wear glasses. And you're like, well, not really the same thing, mate, but
that point that you just made is so bang on. It's like, like I've had it before where someone's been like, like what happened? And you're like, well, nothing happened. There's no story. And they're like, oh yeah, my cousin's got spina bifida. And I'm like, being limb different and having spina bifida are so vastly different that I can't even explain to you as to why that's a bad thing to say.
Yeah, and again, I think it's that thing of like either I can get like really frustrated. It's like, well, actually, to that person, they've probably never met a visually impaired person before, and it was their way of trying to relate to me, I guess. And so I'm a very chill person, so it'd take quite a bit to offend me, I think. So yeah.
Do you know what, Aaron? I have absolutely loved listening to you talk about your journey in your career, but also about visually impaired rugby, and I really, really hope that it gets some really strong legs, because I think it's got the potential to do some real greatness. And I really want to thank you for coming on the show and chatting to me about it, because I've loved it. I've loved listening to about how inclusive rugby as a sport is, and like how it's such a team sport from what you talk about, and I love that so much. And
And yeah, thank you so much for coming on. I've absolutely loved it.
Thanks very much for having me on, and for the chance to help kind of spread the word of VI rugby, and keep up the great work you're doing with the podcast. And as I say, you just don't know who the conversations you're having and the things you're putting out, who that might help and who that might impact. So yeah, keep up the great work.
Oh, thank you so much. I have absolutely loved this. It's been wonderful, and I'll speak to you soon.
Brilliant. Thanks, Brooke. Take care.